here. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to be sharing with you my favorite books that I read in 2020 and which ones I think you guys should put on your list to read in 2021. So let's jump in. If you're new here, welcome. My name is Marian and I make videos about being a mom and being a Jewish mom, and I would love it if you hit that red subscribe button down below so you don't miss any of my videos, especially if you're interested in Hanukkah content, because there's a lot of that coming up. And also, you can follow me on Instagram if you want to see more of my day-to-day life as a Jewish mom. Okay, so I ordered these in terms of lowest to highest, but I'm only including my absolute favorite books of the year. So everything on this list I love and highly recommend, but I just felt like saving the best for last. It's 2020, y'all. I'm gonna do what I want, including film this video at nighttime. So are things feeling a little bit more cozy than usual? Let me know. Okay, so I've got my phone here because I read all my books on my Kindle. What do you guys think of that? I know some people are like, well, I say Kindle. I read them on my phone on the Kindle app. And I know some people are like, no. Okay, so my first book on my favorite list of 2020 is this one. I thought it was just me, but it isn't, by Brené Brown. So I have really been wanting to read a Brené Brown book. I think I've listened to every podcast she's been on this year. I've been doing a lot of podcast listening, and I absolutely love her. Y'all probably know her and her famous TED Talk about vulnerability. And I did a lot of research into what Brené Brown book I wanted to start with, and I chose this one, which is all about how shame can define your life, and overcoming that shame and being vulnerable really opens you up to a richer life full of richer connections to other people, and learning to be empathetic in your connections with people and learning to share and be vulnerable and overcome that shame really provides for a more well-rounded, wholeheartedly better life. So if you're interested in that sort of self-helpy kind of topic, this book is really good. I will say, I love Brené Brown. I love listening to her when she's on podcasts. I found the book a tad bit dry to read. It's not written in a super bingeable way, the way some of the books I have later on this list are written, where you just can't put it down. I could put this one down, but I still found the information in it really fascinating. By the way, I do have a lot of nonfiction, selfie-helpy kind of type of books, and I think that's just 2020. But I think they'll also be super helpful for 2021. But I really have taken this time in lockdown to think about bettering myself, how to be more connected to people in this time of disconnection, and Brené Brown is truly the master of that. So recommend that book. Okay, the next book on my list is Honey from the Rock, which you guys have probably heard me talk about on this channel. It's by Rabbi Kushner, and it is about Jewish Kabbalah or mysticism, and that's a topic I've been very interested in. Again, similar to my critique of the Brené Brown book, I would say it's one you can put down. It's not a highly bingeable book by any means. In fact, it's very dense, and I often will read just a few pages at a time, but I find it so inspiring. So if you are interested in Judaism, mysticism, and all those topics that were not covered in Hebrew school in terms of how we think about God, how it relates to us, all these super abstract mystical topics, but that very much relate to your life, I definitely would check out this book. I mentioned this, what video was it? 2 or 3 videos about, I can't remember what the heck I was talking about, but something about God. Sorry guys. One of the ideas in the book is that people can act as angels of God without knowing it, without you even realizing it. So the book provides these examples and ideas that make you more aware of things going on in your life, if you choose to believe in that aspect of faith that I find fascinating. So I really do recommend that book, but with a little caveat that it's a dense one. Okay, next up on my fave reads of 2020 is a reread for me, and that is The Year of Less by Kate Flanders. I love minimalism. I've made tons of videos about how helpful it can be to motherhood and life in general here on my channel. I'll link some of my favorites down below. But one thing that has definitely occurred to me during lockdown is that a more minimalistic life is just the only way to survive, because we're all in the house making mess, eating meals, playing, creating art, etc. And I just felt that minimizing things as much as I could in terms of the stuff, the inventory around me was super helpful. And I looked back on this book a lot because it was truly inspiring in that way. I will say I put up a little bit of a trigger warning. There's a lot of alcoholism talk, which just personally, I don't know, I was like, it's not my favorite. I mean, yeah, it's not like a joyful topic, but I felt that the minimalism stuff in it, the way it kind of truly retrains your brain is really fascinating. So if you're thinking about getting into that, or you know someone who's getting into minimalism, definitely recommend Kate Flanders' book. Okay, now we're getting into the top of my list, and starting that off with Love's Executioner by Dr. Elome. Oh my goodness, this is a bingeable read. So as I've been interested in self-help topics, I've also been really interested in therapy type topics. So Dr. Elome is a therapist, and each chapter of the book is a different patient that he works with, but he also reveals a lot about himself in it. But the patient stories are fascinating, and he reveals them in a way, like, this book is really well written. He reveals them in a way that you just can't put the book down, because you just like have to see what happens next. So I absolutely have loved reading this book. It also is very insightful in terms of, even though the patient stories are sort of extreme, and you might not find a person in the book that you're like, oh yeah, that's exactly what I've gone through. Their struggles, like the basic element that it boils down to, is this basic idea of humanity, of being alive, of being afraid of death, of missing out on love, like all these basic human things that I'm sure everyone in some way has experienced. So I absolutely love this book, and hearing his perspective as a therapist working people through those problems. Highly recommend that book. Okay, speaking of therapists, my next book is my favorite therapy book, and that is Maybe You Should Talk to Someone. Okay, I don't want to label this as a therapy book because that'll probably turn some of you guys off of it. This was such a good book. This is one of the bestsellers of 2020. The author, Lori Gottlieb, is somebody I follow on Instagram, as well as listen to her podcast with Guy Winch. It is so good, and every podcast she's on, she's amazing. Her advice I always just find so spot on. But Maybe You Should Talk to Somebody is a book about her journey as a therapist. Again, it goes through, I think it's 3 or 4 patients, as well as herself in therapy. Unlike Love's Executioner, it's not a chapter by chapter on each patient. They're all woven throughout, and she really dives into the different patients and how they kind of evolve through their time with her. It is written so well, highly bingeable, really interesting, and again, kind of like Love's Executioner, the basic problems that people have are ones that are just ultimately human, that we can all relate to and learn something from. So I love this book. Also a lot of like twists and turns and surprise things that happen in the plot to keep it going. So one of my favorites. Speaking of bestsellers, gotta mention Untamed by Glennon Doyle. Oh my goodness, that's a good book. Glennon Doyle is also a person who is fascinating to follow on Instagram, as well as I listen to any podcast she's on. She gives just basic life advice. She's had a very fascinating life, and she had written, I think, 2 like life advice kind of guru books before this one. I actually read a little bit of those, but Untamed is by far and away, to me, like heads and tails above those. I think it's so good. It is written so well. Again, a highly bingeable book, just so like emotional, impactful, and powerful. And unlike the 2 books I mentioned previously, which are focused on therapy and people who have like these really big issues, Untamed is written in a way that is just very appealing to everybody. They're basic life issues, not those like, I mean, some of them are super deep and everything, but it's more about the like everyday struggles of just living your life, showing up, having, you know, better relationships with the people around you, being true to yourself. And that is really the hallmark of the book, leading an untamed life. So her whole philosophy is that women especially are taught from a very young age to fit in a perfect little cage, and that when you can release yourself from those bars, that's when you can live your ultimate truth and a more meaningful, happier, better existence. The book was amazing, such like a triumph if you are going through hard times. Oh my goodness, read her book. Okay, and my last book, my top of the top list, is actually one you might not have heard of, and that is the book Wild Game by That's my phone battery dying. Wild Game by Adrienne Brodeur. This was a good one. It's also a sort of like a nonfiction fiction kind of book. It's based on her life story, but it's written as like a fiction book. It reads like fiction, unlike the other books I've mentioned on this video. It's all about her mother and the secret that her mother had her keep for her and how it impacted her throughout her life. It's really a book about mothers and daughters, which as a mother, as a daughter, I find fascinating, and how that, you know, that singular relationship can really impact you for the rest of your life. But the book, it's a good read. It's a really, really good page turner kind of read. It can be a bit depressing at times for sure, but it definitely makes you think about, you know, things from when you were younger and how they impact you now. But even just aside from those life lessons, I think it's just a really good book. I just found it highly bingeable, highly entertaining. I really was looking for books this year to escape kind of the everyday life that we're living right now, because lockdown can be pretty tough sometimes. And I find all of these books to either be really inspiring or to really take you out of the everyday, you know, grind and keep the bigger picture in mind. So I hope you guys liked my list for 2020. I hope they make some maybe good gift recommendations if you guys are shopping for anybody, or even for yourself for some books you might want to read in the new year. So I hope you liked this video. If you did, don't forget to give it a big thumbs up. Subscribe to my channel down below to see more, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!